friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the brand new Strawberry Patch stamp set from Hello Bluebird. So I've stamped those images out on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. And I'm going to be coloring to match some pattern paper from the Cartabella Here, There, and Everywhere 6x6 pad. So I'm just going to tear out the sheet that I want to use as inspiration and tuck that under my cardstock panel so I can pull my color palette from there. I'm going to begin with the strawberries, and for those I'm using R12, R14, and R17. I'm going to start on each one with that darkest shade, the R17, down toward the bottom of the berry. I'm going to do all of them at once. And I am going to color right over those seeds for now because they are so super tiny that it would be really difficult to try to color around them. So I'll go back in later on and fix those, but for now I'm just going to go right over top. I'm moving on to my mid-tone, which is the R14. And I'll take that up the strawberry. I still want to leave some softer area for a little bit of a pink shade to pull in some of those pinks from the pattern paper. So I'm going to switch to the R12 for that and take that all the way up to the little cap on each of those berries. So I tried to split it in about 3 portions, not entirely equal on each one, but you know, some of them are going to be more or less ripe. So just adding that to each of those strawberries, even the little teeny tiny ones. But they weren't quite as vibrant as I wanted them to be, so I am going to go in with a second layer, and I decided to leave that in the video today since this was a little bit of a shorter one, so there was time for it. But sometimes I like to leave it in so you guys can see the difference that it makes. It really does have a big impact on your coloring to go back and add that little bit of extra depth on there. So I'm just very quickly adding in the R14 now, and then that R12. And when I do that final layer of the lightest color, I never cover up completely the lightest area from the first coat, so that there's a little bit of a difference there as well. And then I'm going to switch to some greens. Again, I'm trying to pull out the greens from the pattern paper, so they're a little bit more of like a dull olive. So I'm using YG61, YG63, and YG67 for those. Starting with the YG67 and adding that on just the stems first, and adding that to the bottom area of each section, and then also to the top area if there is something that would be casting a shadow on it, like a leaf or even those tiny little leaf clusters up there. I just wanted to you know, have a little bit of dimension on those as well. And then I'm going to use the same shades for the rest of the leaves and also the caps of the strawberries. Since they're all connected to the same plant, they're all going to have the same green shade. For those wider leaves, I put the YG67 down the center where the line is drawn, and then a little bit out on either side. And then I'm blending toward the edges with the YG63, and then using the YG61 for a highlight on the outer edges, and then on the top of the leaf that is curled up. And I did go back in with a little extra of that YG67 to deepen up that little creased area there. And then I'll move on to my strawberry caps, and again I'm starting with the darkest shade, the YG67, and just adding a little bit here and there closest to the berry because that's where the light would not be hitting it the most, and then the parts that are kind of bent up would be catching more of the light. So I'll blend out with some of the YG63 and just save a little bit of room on there for that YG61. They're super tiny there, but I just wanted to have the same dimension on those strawberry caps as I did on the rest of the coloring. And by the way, I did end up coloring 3 extra single strawberries I ended up needing those at the end of the video, but I did that off screen because I colored them exactly the same. But there are 3 single strawberries in this stamp set, that super little tiny one, which I love, and then there are 2 kind of medium sized ones. So yeah, I did go back in with an extra layer of that YG67 on the caps. And then I'm going to pull in Y11, Y13, and Y15 for the center of the blossom. I just started with the darkest shade toward the bottom right, blended up toward the top left. And then I wanted to throw a little tiny bit of that Y11 on some of the strawberries. I put that on the light pink area. Didn't cover it completely, but just threw in a tiny bit of that to also tie into the yellow in the pattern paper. Then for the white parts of the petal, I didn't want to go blue because the flowers in the pattern paper are more of a blue-violet. So I'm using a little bit of BV quadruple 0 and BV 00 to add some shading to that. And then for the mouse, I decided to go with a little white mouse. I haven't done a white mouse in a long time. I decided to use some warm grays for him. I used W00, W1, and W3. Just a tiny bit of that W3 because I didn't want him to look gray, but I wanted him to have some dimension. So a little bit of that, and then blended that out with the W1, still sticking really close to the outside edge, so I have plenty of white space. And then I'll bring in that W00 and blend that out and leave some of that white cardstock showing through for the actual highlight. And then I did also go back in with a touch more of that W3 in just a few little places to really emphasize the dimension of him, just make him kind of look more lifted off the page, just in those darkest little crevices. And then I'll blend that back out with the W1 and then use a touch more of that W00 to soften that into the white once again. And then of course I wanted to give him some little pink areas again to tie in the pinks in that pattern paper. I'm going to use R000, R00, and R01. I'll color in his nose and then his ears and his tail using that R01 first, blending out with the R00 and then that R000, kind of softening it into the white area. I did go back and add a little extra of the R01 on the base of the tail where it would be the deepest shadow. And then I gave him some rosy cheeks with the R01 and the R00. Then I'm going to take a white Sakura Jelly Roll pen and get that going off to the side. And I'll go over all of those little seeds and just bring those strawberries back to life. I think that really adds a lot of dimension to them and just gives them more character. And it's so much easier to go back and do this after the fact than to color around them, like I said earlier. So I'm just going to carefully go around and add a tiny little dot to each of those areas where the seeds are drawn. Even on the teeny tiny ones, there's a couple seeds on those as well, so I'm just being really careful to go over those, and I'll just work my way around. So you probably want a gel pen that has a little bit of a thinner tip for this. I know sometimes they come in like a fine, medium, and like a wide line, and I think mine is a medium. I'm not exactly sure. I've had this one for so long, but you probably don't want a super wide one. So once I finish with all of those seeds, I'm also going to get a black Jelly Roll pen started off to the side. And I'm going to go over the eyes of my little mouse, just makes them nice and bright and shiny. And then I will trim these images out with their matching dies. For the background, I'm going to take a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock and I'm just going to watercolor a really simple background. I've been really into doing this lately. It's really quick and easy, and I think it really can be a nice backdrop for your images, especially when you spent all that time Copic coloring your images. Sometimes it's nice to do something a little bit more simple in the background, and then it really allows your images to kind of come to the front and shine. So the shades I'm using are Shaded Lilac and Bundled Sage, and I'm just kind of adding them here and there, not really being too particular about it, but just kind of pouncing that brush on the cardstock. And I don't want them to mix too much because I don't want it to turn brown, but definitely kind of butting them up against each other and allowing them to flow a little bit together, and pouncing down that brush so I get little areas of darker and lighter color to just make it look a bit more organic and not so planned out. I like to be really loose with it. I did want to add in just a touch of blue because I wanted it to kind of be a sky, but I'm going to use just the barest amount of tumbled glass and mix that in with the other two shades here and there. Not too much because there really wasn't blue in that pattern paper. Like I mentioned, it was more of a blue violet, but the Shaded Lilac is more of a purple, so having that little bit of blue in there kind of mixed in, I think adds to that blue violet tone that was in the pattern paper. So I'm just going to finish that up, and then I will let that dry a little bit, and then I want to do some splatter detail. I'm just going to do this Shaded Lilac and the Bundled Sage. So I'm going to switch paintbrushes. I want to use a thin one here because that's going to get me smaller, finer splatters, and that's what I'm going for. I'm going to do the Shaded Lilac first, get those super fine little splatters, and then I'll add in some of the Bundled Sage as well. So I just cleaned off that brush in between uses, and then I'm tapping that against my finger to get that splatter all over the cardstock. I'm going to set this panel aside to dry, and in the meantime I'll go back to my pattern paper. So I'm going to choose one more print to use with the floral. I went with this red and white stripe. I think that's going to be really pretty and tie in with those strawberries. I'm going to die cut both of those with the Hello Bluebird Gallery Frame 2, and then I'm going to swap the inserts, and that will give me two different frames. So I could make two cards here. I'm going to just use one today, and I can save the second one for another day. I like to do that because it makes the second card come together really quick and easy sometimes. I recently did a video showing you guys how I put a card together using an older frame that I had saved from a previous card, just like this, and then also a previously colored image, and then kind of built the card around that and added in some extra images to fill it out. And honestly, that ended up being one of my favorite cards I've made this year. I really liked how that one turned out. So I'm just taking some Scotch tape, regular Scotch Magic tape here, and taping the frames back together. And I'm going to save that second one like I said. But now I am going to start working on my sentiment because that panel has dried, and I am masking off part of it. The sentiment says "just for you," but I actually want to replace the word "you" with a die cut. So I'm just stamping out the "just for" using VersaFine Onyx Black ink and masking off the "you" with a little piece of Post-it tape. Then I'll pop in my card base, which is Lawn Fawn Ballet Slippers cardstock, and I'm stamping that in Lawn Fawn bubblegum ink. And I picked the little mice couple holding the berry, and "You're the Berry Best." For that sentiment, I'm going to take the new Just For You word die and just use the word "you" from that. And I die cut that once out of some Lawn Fawn Sugar Plum cardstock, and then 4 times out of just plain white cardstock, because I wanted to build this up so it'll be a little bit more substantial. So I'm just carefully layering those on top of each other by adding some liquid glue there, using that Barely Art Precision Craft Glue with a super fine nozzle, and then just squeezing those die cuts together so I know that they're lined up perfectly straight. And I'm just working as quickly as I can while still trying to be neat and precise because this glue does dry really fast. So I just want to make sure that I have that all lined up perfectly so that they all kind of fit together and just look like a nice tall stack. So I added 4 of the whites together like I said, and then at the top I'm going to add on the purple one. And I went with that purple to represent that blue violet in the pattern paper that didn't get really represented very much in the coloring other than that one little strawberry blossom. So that'll tie in nicely to that. So once I have all that done, I can start assembling this card. So I'm going to take the frame. I've added some thin strips of Scotch 3M foam tape to the back to support that so I can pop it up on the card and give it a bit of dimension. I'm going to peel off those release papers, line it up on the background so that the stamped part of the sentiment is in the lower left corner. Press that down into place, and then I can glue that on the front of my card base, just using more of that liquid glue. And then I'm going to line that up on there so that I have equal bits of that pink poking through on all four sides. And then just press that down into place so that glue can adhere. And then I can bring in my images, and I am going to pop up all of them with some foam tape. I will use a little bit of liquid glue for a couple of places that are going to be on top of the frame, but other than that, everything else is popped up. So I'm going to add the strawberry vine over on the left-hand side, kind of coming across the top of the scene. Just making sure that I have that lined up where I want it. And then right below that little arch is where I'm going to add my little mouse. I think he's so adorable. All of the mice in this set are so super darling, but this one is my favorite. I just had to use him on today's card. And then I'm going to take the two single strawberries and just put them down toward the bottom of the scene, kind of laying on the ground there, leaning up against one another. And then that little flower, I'm going to add a little piece of foam tape. It's going to be kind of hanging off of where the leaves are, so a little bit of foam tape for where it will hang off, and then some liquid glue where it will be on top. And I'll just add that for that little pop of yellow. Then I'm going to take that U sentiment and add that down at the bottom part of the frame. And I'm just holding that with my EK Success reverse tweezers to keep my fingers out of the glue. And then I'm going to place that down right next to the stamped part of the sentiment. That's going to fill up that space really nicely. But there is some empty space around that, which is why I wanted to add those couple of extra strawberries like I mentioned. So I'm going to add 2 down underneath the word U. Again, one of the medium and one of the small. Just repositioning that quickly before it sticks down permanently. And then the other strawberry I'm going to put right above the word just. And just making sure to kind of tilt that at a little bit of a different angle than the other two. And then I wanted to add some stardust stickles. So I'm going to fill in the center of the little blossom. And then I'm going to add it to each of my leaves as well. So just putting a little line down the center of the larger leaves, and then kind of like a little scribble of that stardust stickles at the cap of each of the strawberries, just where the darkest area is, just for a little pop of something pretty and sparkly. And then I wanted to add even more sparkle, so I decided to bring in a few sparkling clear sequins. Just a couple. I'm going to put 3 up at the top part of the card, and then 2 down below where the sentiment is, and I'm using my Studio Katia embellishment wand to pick those up. I'll let those dry for maybe a minute, and then I'm going to fill in the centers with a little bit more of that stardust stickles. Extra glitter never hurts. So once I have those filled in, I'm going to lift that card up to the camera so you can see all of that sparkle and shine and all of those details. And I'll give you another peek at the inside of the card as well. I don't know, this whole release was so adorable. It's impossible to pick favorites, but I do absolutely love this set so much. It just really stole my heart. I hope that you enjoyed it too. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. You can subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. All of the products I use will be listed and linked for you under the description bar. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I will see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.